All right, guys, we're going to give a little bit more in-depth information here on this round. I think pretty much our plan going forward for shorts is to not do any talking in the short, just to kind of show the item. And if there's additional interest, then you can click on that link in the short, and it will bring you to a little bit longer format, nothing crazy, but, you know, a few minutes talking about a little bit details about what we were showing in that short. In this instance, we have the 37 millimeter M63 high explosive round. Now, this is a U.S. Army World War II era round, obsolete really before the end of World War II, but these rounds and the guns that fired them, both the anti-tank guns and also the tank guns, were used pretty effectively in the Pacific theater. Not so much in the European theater. This stuff against German armor, I think you guys know what the story is there. But anyways, this round was fired in the M3A1 37 millimeter towed anti-tank gun, as well as the M5 and M6 tank guns, which were used in the M3 and M5 Stuart tanks, as well as the M8 armored car. Muzzle velocity on the round, we're looking at about 2,700 feet per second, and had a range of 9,500 yards. This is the original yellow paint on the projectile. Now, about halfway through 1942, they changed from yellow, denoting high explosive, to olive drab. And so it would have been yellow with black markings, and this is actually a sectioned or a cutaway round. And you can see a little bit of the ink right there. So it would have been yellow with black markings for high explosive. And then later on, beyond 1942, they started using the green with yellow ink to denote high explosive. So this filler would have been TNT in this particular projectile. But as I said, this is a sectioned round, which I'm sure you probably saw in the short. But let's start at the base of the projectile. We'll take a look at the markings that we can still see. This would have been M16. M16 being the model of the cartridge case. This round could have been loaded with the M16 cartridge case or the M16B1. B1 denoting the fact that it was a steel case. But this is not a B1. This is a straight M16, so it is drawn brass. It is not steel. Obviously, they were using steel when they figured out they could because of the scarcity of brass and other non-ferrous metals. So they tried to conserve when they could. Date 1942. I believe the projectile is also dated 1942. We can take a look at those markings as well. 37 millimeter, M63, which is the model of the projectile, 1942. And we've got a very nice ordnance proof crest right there, which is also incorporated into our logo for our company, one of our logos, ordnance.com. But that's the U.S. Army Ordnance Corps. They've used that crest for almost 200 years now. Anyways, I digress. This round, the M63, showed you the markings on the base. Now you can see the primer. The primer's not a screw-in. You can't see any threads right there because, well, there are no threads. It is a press-in primer. And this model, I think, was the M38A1. Did not use a flash tube, just a straight artillery primer. That's the housing. And in the back here, you would have had a striker or an anvil, and then a gas check, a gas seal, and then you would have a percussion primer, in this case, something very similar to the 50 cal percussion primer. And so you have a artillery firing pin, which is flat-faced. It's not like a normal firing pin that would be used in, say, a centerfire rifle that has got a nice radius to it. Like, for instance, I have a mortar screw-in firing pin right here. You can see on the tip, it's got that nice ball radius to it. Anyways, on a artillery firing pin, you are not going to have that. It's going to be flat-faced. And that's going to, once it's fired and that spring tension is released onto the firing pin, it comes in here and that flat face hits the flat face of your anvil. On the front side of that anvil, you have a little tit, a little kind of a sharp point, which acts as essentially a firing pin, and that moves in, hits your percussion 50 cal primer, and it starts your explosive train. And so that'll ignite your M1 propellant in here, and obviously that creates a lot of heat and high pressure, and that forces your projectile out of the cartridge case, out of the chamber, down the muzzle, and off to the target. Before we get to the target, we'll talk about the projectile design a little bit. So you've got this band here, which is called a drive or driving band, and it is made of soft metal, usually non-ferrous metal like brass or copper is the most commonly used metal. And it's softer, and so this acts twofold. One, as an obturating band, which obturates or deforms and acts as a gas check. And okay, so you've got your lands and your grooves that make up the bore of your rifle. And so when this leaves the chamber and starts to engage the rifling, you've got all these propellant gases that are built up behind here from the round being fired. And you do not want those. You want those gases completely captured behind the projectile. So if you don't, and they escape by it, then you lose velocity, you lose range, you have inaccuracy, you've got very inconsistent rounds from shot to shot. So you want to contain all that behind the round, and this copper ring serves that function. It obturates or deforms, and it traps those gases behind there, and it also, this soft metal is much softer than the lands of your rifling. And so it engages the lands, and it starts, whether it's a left-hand or right-hand twist to your barrel, and it starts to rotate at a very high velocity. It leaves your muzzle, and the projectile is rotating at several thousand RPM, and that stabilizes it in flight. Very, very necessary, or you have a tremendous loss of accuracy. Other types of projectiles don't have to have rotating bands because they have fins for stabilization, as this does. This is a depleted uranium DU penetrator from an M919 25mm Bushmaster round that we already did a video on. But back to the M63 here. And so that's the purpose of the drive band. And so it's now gone. It has exited the muzzle. It's rotating at a very high velocity to stabilize it in flight. Maximum range, as I mentioned previously, is 9,500 yards. So this makes contact with your target. And then back here, essentially, you've got your firing pin and primer situation that has been duplicated inside the base of the projectile. So if I can get kind of a tight shot here, this is under spring tension. And so when your projectile makes contact with the target, that striker, which you might be able to see the tip of it in there, moves forward and strikes essentially a primer in here. And that detonates a charge inside your cup. I'm not exactly sure on this, but it's oftentimes tetryl, which is a high explosive filler that's pretty sensitive to shock, and it would detonate inside the cup. That would fragment, and that would detonate your TNT charge inside the projectile here, and that would obviously cause blast fragmentation and a bad day for whoever was around this. Sometimes this round is referred to as an APHE. I've seen it in a couple different publications. 90% of the time, it's referred to as just strictly a high explosive, even though just because the shape of the ogive here on the projectile that you're going to have some penetrative properties, especially soft-skinned applications. So that is it. TNT, I'm not sure if I mentioned or not, but the filler was TNT, and the weight of the filler was less than 1/10 of a pound. I want to say it was 0.088 pounds of TNT high explosive filler in the projectile. And that is it. That is the M63 high explosive 37mm round for the anti-tank gun and tank gun. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. Let us know what you want to see. We have a whole lot of stuff that we can show y'all, and just let us know what you're interested in, and we'll see if we can dig it out and make a video of it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the support.